Wired.com presents The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. And here is your host, David Barr Kirtley.
Hello, and welcome to episode 127 of Geek's Guide to the Galaxy. Today on the show, we'll be discussing two recent science fiction films, Disney's Big Hero 6 and Christopher Nolan's Interstellar, and picking our favorite. And I'm joined by three guests. So first up, we've got our producer, John Joseph Adams. He's the editor of Lightspeed and Nightmare magazines, and also the series editor of Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy. He's also edited many anthologies, including the recent books The End Is Now, Dead Man's Hand, and Help Fund My Robot Army. So John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, good to be back.
Then next up, we've got author and film producer Rob Bland, who you may remember from our panel on Batman in episode 66, and our panel on Guardians of the Galaxy in episode 115. He's a two-time Cine Eagle Award winner for the short films On Time and Writer's Block, and he's currently executive producing a feature-length independent film, 79 Parts, directed by Ari Taub. Rob is also a graduate of the Odyssey Writers Workshop, and is currently working on a fantasy novel titled Divinity Bind. So Rob, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
And also joining us today is Carrie Vaughn, who you may remember from our feature interview all the way back in episode 9. She's the author of the New York Times bestselling Kitty Norville series, about a werewolf who hosts a radio call-in show for supernatural creatures. Book 13, Low Midnight, will be out this month. Other recent work includes the novel Dreams of the Golden Age, and short story appearances in Lightspeed magazine, as well as in the anthologies Rogues and Dangerous Women, edited by George R.R. Martin and Gardner Dozois. So, Carrie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Okay, and so we're going to talk about Big Hero 6. So, John, why don't you start us off and just tell us, what did you know about this movie going into it, and what sort of expectations did you have?
I didn't know much about it going into it. The main thing that I knew about it was that my friend Andy Romine worked on it as an animator. He previously worked on How to Train Your Dragon. And so, you know, I was looking forward to it for that reason, but I didn't really know much about it otherwise. I knew it was a Marvel property, but it was something I wasn't familiar with. I believe it's actually based on a Japanese sort of manga-style Marvel comic that isn't even available here. I actually looked it up on Amazon to see if I could find a graphic novel of the actual source material, and I seem to be having some trouble. I saw some individual issues that were being sold like third-party for a lot of money, but I didn't see like just a graphic novel. There were plenty of novelizations and stuff like that, but I couldn't really find the source material. So, but anyway, you know, I mean, yeah, going into it, I had I basically had zero expectations. I mean, I saw the trailer, I thought it looked fun, but I couldn't have really said one way or another what that I expected it to be amazing or anything. But yeah, once I did see it, I actually did think it was amazing. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and how about Rob? I know you read comic books. What did you think about this upcoming Big Hero 6 movie?
Yeah, actually, I wasn't familiar with the Big Hero 6, comic books. So I was not, I had no expectations, so I had seen the trailer. I knew it was a Marvel property, and the trailer hooked me instantly. So I was excited to see it. I can't say that I had any real set expectations, and I ended up loving it. So.
And what was it about the trailer that hooked you?
Just the humor with Baymax chasing after the ball. You lean over and just kick it. And I was just like, I don't know. It was the very humorous shape of the robot. I was like, oh, that seems very different. I really want to check that out. So.
Mm-hmm. How about Carrie? What sort of expectations did you have?
Well, like the others, I didn't know very much about it going into it, just what I saw from the trailer. And I have to be honest, I was not hooked by the trailer. I think they picked some of the most slapsticky bits from the movie to put in the trailer. And it did seem slapsticky to me. I hadn't originally planned on going to see it at all. until it started getting such good buzz and everybody said such great things about it. And it's superheroes, which is part of my thing and what I write about and what I do. So I always like to to see what's going on, and always looking for something just a little bit different on superheroes. So I didn't have a whole lot of expectations. I also didn't realize until I went to see it that it was Disney, because it did have such kind of an anime style to it, and I knew the source material was anime inspired as well, anime manga inspired. So I was kind of surprised and pleased to learn that it is Disney Animation, and that Pixar's John Lasseter was the executive producer. So it's got a good pedigree. But yeah, I didn't really know what to expect from it either, just that it was getting good feedback from people I trusted.
Yeah, I have to say, I also was underwhelmed by the trailer, which, like you say, just seemed it kind of just made it seem like a kid's movie to me. And I ended up liking it more than I thought from the trailer. But I had also read an article about it in Wired magazine where it had talked about, Pixar and Disney and how this was this manga comic. I actually did a little bit of research on the comic, and it sounds like there's essentially no connection between the graphic novel and this movie. The graphic novel, like, hero works for some secret government agency, and he built Baymax as this battle robot, and it turns into a dragon robot, like a transformer thing. And
very different.
So fundamentally different. My God.
That explains why I can't find the graphic novel. Because they probably don't. They want to suppress it. It's like, the people are gonna think, what the hell is this?
And and two other things is that Fred in the comic can, like, astrally project a dragon monster to appear. And Go-Go, like, turns into, like, a blast of flame or something like that when she screams her name. So, yeah, they really, they really deviated from the source material on this one.
Well, I have to say, actually, just learning that, I'm really pleased with the changes that they made. I mean, like, regardless of, like, I don't have any fealty to the original source material, as I said, so all I'm basing that on is just what you said, but I just love all the changes that they made from that. Like, I mean, obviously, sounds like maybe were the characters older in the original, because it's like, I mean, that I don't know that would have made all that much sense with the kids that we see in the movie.
I think Hiro is a boy genius in the manga. Okay. I don't know how old the other characters are. I mean, all the women in the manga also look like much more like stereotypical, like, male sex fantasy superheroes, or female superheroes.
Yeah.
So, and also, like, Baymax isn't a medical robot in any way. And there was one other, and Hiro doesn't have a brother.
Oh,
right.
Okay.
So
Wow.
it's sort of like everything you think.
Yeah.
But one thing I did want to say to give the trailer credit is that it didn't spoil the entire movie.
True.
And apparently the Japanese version of the trailer, I think, did spoil the entire movie. Like, it gave away that Tadashi was gonna. Oh shoot! I forgot to give a spoiler warning. Spoiler warning, by the way. The Japanese version of the trailer, and that goes for Interstellar too. The Japanese version of the trailer gave away that Tadashi was going to die in the trailer, and stuff like that just drives me insane.
That actually does seem like the sort of thing that we would have seen in the trailer, so I'm glad they didn't do it. Because I think a lot of movies actually do have stuff like that in trailers, because it does happen so early on in the movie that you could conceivably argue that it isn't really a spoiler. But yeah, I think it's much more effective when you can just watch the movie and not realize that's going to happen, because that was such an emotional part of the movie and was so well done that I think it would have definitely lost something if we just knew it was coming right from the start. So yeah, I'm glad that they didn't do that. Although I will say I agree with you that the trailer that we did see didn't actually really communicate the heart that the movie has, because I think that's what makes it so amazing in my eyes, is that there's like the emotional stuff in the movie is so well done, and it's just like overflowing with heart, and it's like heart and fun. It's like an equal measure. That's like what the movie's like made of, and so, I mean, that's what made it work so well for me, and so I'm glad that they didn't spoil all that in the trailer, but on the other hand, it would have been nice if they gave a little bit of a hint of that, so maybe more people would have run out to go see it.
Oh, that's interesting. I only saw one trailer for that movie. Because I think the trailer that I saw was the teaser trailer. Did they do a full trailer for...
The one I saw, it's the scene basically where Hiro's he's giving his report to the cop who doesn't believe him. Mm-hmm. And it's basically that, and then like a couple like slapstick things with Baymax, and that's the whole trailer.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one that I saw.
There was one with him trying to fit into his armor and popping out of it. That the same kind of physical humor
right,
that I think makes up the funny half of the movie.
Right.
It's interesting to me. One of the things I noticed about the movie that I haven't decided how I feel about it, but the movie felt very young to me, and all of those changes seem geared towards making it young. The characters are all students. They're all young students. They're kind of recognizably that late teenage type, but the movie seemed even younger than that, like middle grade instead of a young adult book, and because it sounds like, in the graphic novel, it's a much older audience and much older characters, much older kind of situations. And it surprised me, I think, because I've kind of gotten used to animated movies that do work on multiple levels and are geared towards older audiences. Something like The Incredibles is definitely, adults are the main characters. There's multiple levels of humor there. Edna Mole is a a long extended joke that your average 10-year-old is not going to get. But most of us just love that. And Big Hero 6 didn't really have anything like that in there, which left me a little, I'm not going to say confused. It was just something I noticed because I don't have too many kids in my life, so I haven't been going to see really kid-oriented animated movies. And this one definitely was. I think targeted. I felt like the target age was about 12.
Yeah, I felt like even though, I agree, like it obviously was targeted at that age, I felt like it did a really good job of having like an all ages feel to it. Like even though it didn't have some of the stuff that specifically aimed at adults, like you say, but I felt like yeah, I mean, there was nothing in the movie that, like, when I was watching it that I felt like, oh, like, that's like kind of a dumbed down thing that they put in there for kids. It's like everything just, like, felt like it worked together so well to me that, like, I didn't really have any complaints. And I mean, I have watched a lot of these, sort of, animated features that, are obviously much more, designed for kids and if adults like them, fine, but they're like, who cares if they don't, whereas this one really felt like it just like hit every box on, checked every box and just worked for me like on basically every level.
Yeah, it's not a criticism or a complaint to say that it's young. It's just something that I noticed that it seemed much more conscious of its age target than a lot of animated movies do.
Oh, I was going to say, too, that, what Dave was saying, some of the changes between the source material and the movie, one of the other things I really like that they chose to do in the movie was that they kept it much more science-focused, so it's like, that's like a science fiction movie. I mean, like, some of the science, like, is pretty ridiculous because it's like superhero stuff, but I mean, it's all science fiction, whereas, like, what Dave was describing, like, the astral projecting as one of the powers and stuff. It's like, okay, well, that's getting more into, like, sort of wishy-washy fantasy stuff. And it's like, I mean, I like fantasy, but, like, I really appreciated that, given that it's focused around a robot, that they actually made, they tried to make all of the powers just specifically science-focused.
Well, that was my favorite thing about the movie, is that the characters were scientists. They wanted to be scientists. Science was a good thing. They solved their problems with science. And, for such a long time now, we've had Hollywood movies where science is the bad guy, like not just scientists doing evil things, but science itself being the thing that will destroy us all. And this was not that at all. And not to jump ahead of ourselves, but I got the same feeling from Interstellar. So it was just such a relief to have, a movie where the kids want to do science and it's a good thing and they're not nerds. They're not stereotypical. And that was great.
Yeah, that was very refreshing. Plus, I think the one element that really does appeal to the adult in that movie is just how incredibly kind and warm and huggable this healthcare assistant is. I mean, that's the way I want to experience the healthcare system, and so that sort of very approachable and likable way of looking at a healthcare assistant, I think sort of tapped into the adult angst that we have about the healthcare system. I mean, I'm kind of reaching, I feel, but but I mean, that's the way I responded. That's the way I, as an audience member, responded to Baymax.
And I mean, I also feel like as an adult, I appreciated the diversity in this movie.
Oh, totally.
That even just from the first shot where it looks like the Golden Gate Bridge, but it has sort of a Japanese architectural styling to it. I was just blown away by that. And then I was just continually delighted by how diverse the characters were. And I really felt like this is a movie that's going in the right direction in that respect.
Yeah, and oh man, the city design was so amazing, and like, you know, just like throwing it out there, like without, you know, just tossing you right in, and then you find out the city's called like San Francisco or whatever. So it's like a combination of San Francisco and Tokyo, obviously, and it's like, but they did such a wonderful job, like merging the looks of the cities to make it look that way too. And oh man, that was just so great. I don't know. Again, I don't know about the source material if it had that or if it was just like set in Tokyo or something, since that was a Japanese comic. But that was a really cool decision. And it really helped with the you know, sort of focus on the diversity of the movie too. I think because it just made it all feel right.
I'll just say, John, about the comic, all the characters or all the main characters are Japanese in the comic, and I think it's just set in Tokyo. I'm not sure about that, but I believe all that stuff is a credit to the filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
Well, stylistically as well, it's manga tropes with Western superhero tropes, you know, in the same story, and it was an interesting blending of both of those styles. And I think that was reflected in just the look of the movie and the way the story was handled.
In terms of the look, does Baymax look the same in this movie versus the graphic novel?
No. I mean, he's just like a transformer in the graphic novel. He's not inflatable or anything like that.
Okay, that's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah. Okay. It's kind of surprising they even it's like they even called it the same thing. It's like it sounds like it's so different. But I mean, I guess it has enough similarities that it's easier just to do that and build on that. But yeah, I mean, wow, it sounds just so completely different. I'm kind of glad I couldn't find the graphic novel because I'm sure I would have been disappointed with it now.
Okay, so you guys mentioned this. I mean, the science, like you guys were saying, is one thing I really loved, and I could just imagine lots of kids applying to Carnegie Mellon after watching this movie.
Yeah.
And that leads into, like, Baymax obviously was fantastic, and also the microbot. I was just blown away by the microbots. I just loved that so much. And
great villain, great use of the nanotech.
And apparently, like, they could only Disney or Pixar or whatever now has this gigantic computer processing facility consisting of 50 supercomputers or something like that. And that's what enables them to do the microbots. And actually, it's kind of interesting. The San Francisco was procedurally generated. So, you know, it's not like people drew all those streets and buildings. It was all kind of randomized, and it generated different cities. And they're like, okay, we like that one.
Wow, that's cool.
What?
Cool.
That's crazy. Holy crap. That's amazing.
But yeah, so the microbots, I thought that was definitely one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's just really cool to see. Yeah, and the inflatable robots too. I guess the filmmaker said that they spoke to like actual robot labs and students and stuff, and a lot of that came out of interactions with actual robotic students, and it really, you could tell because it really felt very very like a real lab environment to me.
Yeah, you mentioned you can imagine kids running off to try to go to Carnegie Mellon after this. Yeah, my stepdaughter actually was talking about building robots after that, and I was like, well, hey, it's not too late to decide to go do that. I mean, she's only 12, so she has lots of time to decide what she wants to do for her career or whatever. And but the funny thing is that she looks exactly like Honey Lemon. It's like when we went to see it, my wife was just like cracking up at Honey Lemon. She's like, oh my god, that's Grace. It's like put a headband on her. It's exactly her. So just that was kind of funny, but she doesn't want to be Honey Lemon. She wants to be Hero, so.
Of course.
Yeah.
I don't blame her at all.
All right, so I think it sounds like we all agree that just the world and the characters of this movie were terrific. I had a few more problems with the plot.
I had problems with the plot. That was the one thing that kept me from fully embracing the movie. Not the plot per se, but its predictability. It was a very rote plot. I didn't actually love the movie as much as I wanted to. I was in the middle of it thinking I should be loving this, and I am not. I call it shutting off my author brain. I was not able to shut off my author brain. And it's because I was sitting there going, okay, this is the kind of movie that has a plot twist. What's the plot twist going to be? Oh, this is going to be the plot twist. And when you're doing that within the first 20 minutes of the movie, that's not good. You know what's going to happen from then on.
Right.
So I didn't love it like I wanted to.
What were your plot problems that you couldn't, overcome?
I knew who the bad guy was.
Sure.
Okay.
I knew that twist was going to come. Like I said, I don't think there's anything wrong with the plot. It was just things I had seen before.
Okay, so it just seems sort of ordinary.
It seemed rote. Given how much inventiveness is in the rest of the movie, the plot did seem kind of rote. Although I love the bad guy, just visually, the villain was fantastic.
And the villain had a reasonable motive.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And yeah.
Well, hold on. I want to get to the villain's motive, but yeah, I agree with Carrie about the predictability of the plot. That, like, if you contrast this to The Incredibles, which is a fairly similar movie, but I felt like The Incredibles, the plot surprised me a lot more than this one. But the villain, that was actually my biggest problem with the movie. I felt like the plot twist was more or less arbitrary. That there was no, I mean, you sort of kind of knew it was coming because that's the structure of these stories. Mm-hmm. But when it was revealed to be Professor Callahan, I just felt like there had been no foreshadowing of his motives before that reveal. It just felt really arbitrary to me.
Mm-hmm. He was the person standing in that part of the plot.
Yeah.
So there
right.
you go.
Yeah, I think the only foreshadowing was his overt anger towards the what's that character's name?
Cray, Alistair Cray.
Yeah, exactly. It was his overt, distrust and anger. That was the only foreshadowing that they had done, I think, at that point.
Well, and that foreshadowing was even just done as like a red herring, basically, because it was designed to make us and the characters think that Cray is the one that would have stolen the tech.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's like, obviously, it's like, well, when you first see the guy, it's like, well, it's obviously it's got to be either Cray or Callahan or Tadashi. And I was like, oh God, don't make it be Tadashi. Like that, I mean, that would have been a much bigger plot twist, but I was like, I was dreading that it was going to be. And I was like, no, that would ruin it. That would ruin the movie if it had been.
So John, what happened to you happened to me then? Because just before the big reveal, I was like, oh no! I hope it's not his brother. Oh no!
Right? No, that would have been terrible. That would have been awful. I'm so glad that it wasn't. But I mean, yeah, no, you guys are totally right. Like Callahan, it's like it's not much of a plot twist. It's like, okay, well, it's obviously one of those people that we've seen already, and yeah, I mean, it's like it would have been nice if it was sort of set up better so that we could have been surprised and yet it made sense. But yeah, I mean, I can't argue with that. It didn't really bother me per se, just because like the movie was so fun and everything otherwise. So I forgive it for that. But that's a fair cop. Since we're talking about some criticisms of the movie, one minor criticism I had came in a part which I actually quite like, but if I sort of stop and analyze it, it kind of falls apart a little bit. So like when Baymax starts running out of battery power. And he sort of, and so like that's all funny, and I love some of the gags, like when he tries to climb up the stairs and just face plants into the stairs, and like he's like petting the cat, and he's like, "Harry, baby," and it's like that's all funny, right? But it's like, okay, well he's drunk though. It's like when he runs low on battery power, he turns drunk, and it's like. That doesn't quite make sense to me. Like, why would the robot act that way? It's like, sure, like when he started slurring his words and sort of slowing down, that kind of makes sense because you think about like a tape player or something low on batteries. For all you kids out there were these things called tape players that you used to listen to music on. But anyway, like when the batteries would run low, like it'd sort of slow down and it would talk like this when it plays stuff, and so that kind of made sense to me, but. He just started acting drunk, and that didn't really quite work when I sort of analyze it. But I loved all the gags that resulted from it, so I couldn't really complain too much. But if you force me to criticize something, that's one thing that occurred to me.
That's kind of a nitpick. But
yeah, sure. No, I fully admit it's a nitpick, and I mean I wouldn't really mention it otherwise, except that it's like if I'm forced to pick something, I'll pick that one.
All right, then. Yeah, I can't really go with you on that one, John. But I mean, the one, the sort of the other nitpicky thing I have is that at the very end, when Hero discovers that Baymax has secreted his microchip in his closed fist, how did he do that? Once he unplugged it from his chest, I'm actually not sure. It just didn't seem like he should have been deactivated at that point, or he should have become evil Baymax, or I don't know something.
He had a temporary memory.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was still in RAM.
At the speed of plot.
Yeah.
I thought they sort of established that he had a temporary memory bank. Wasn't there earlier in the movie when they are switching out the chips? Wasn't there a point in time when the chip was out and he still had some of his personality? Wasn't there a brief moment in time? It didn't last, but wasn't there a brief moment in time?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Because I've only seen the movie once, but I could have sworn there was a moment where he turns into evil Baymax, and he.
I think if that moment, if you want that moment to be there, then that moment is there.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I can't be precise about that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from with that. It's like I see. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a question, and I mean, I think like Carrie says, I mean, if you want to, you can find the justification for that working. But that scene was so well done, though. It's like even though it's like you kind of know like that kind of thing is going to happen in this kind of movie, it's like no. Baymax, and I mean, he's a robot, so you're like, oh well, of course, Tadashi will Hero will probably build him again, but it's like, well, but then I didn't actually see the card thing coming. Like I didn't, and so like whether or not it was they set it up 100% correctly, that's another thing. But I mean, like I didn't see that coming at all. So I thought that was really cool because it's like, well, that's still essentially that's Baymax because he's his brain on that chip. It's like so you can rebuild the body all you want as long as you still have the Baymax chip. Then that's still Baymax. So I feel like he we got to have the emotion of the robot sacrificing himself, and yet he still didn't really die. So,
welcome to Disney.
Yeah. Well, but you don't want Baymax to die, did you? Like, it would have been so sad.
Of course I didn't. I was heartbroken. I shed a tear.
See, but it's a robot movie. You always rebuild the dead robot at the end of the robot movie. Same thing happened in Iron Giant.
Yeah.
That this is the trope, and this is what I was saying about it being, oh yes, of course this happens, because this is a happy robot movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was getting a huge Iron Giant flashbacks during this movie.
Yeah.
Which is a fantastic movie, by the way. There's nothing wrong with Iron Giant flashbacks.
Oh yeah, no.
I will say about that parallel universe place, it looked unbelievable. I just had my jaw hanging open when they went in there. The visuals were spectacular at that part.
Yeah, no, that was really beautiful in there, yeah, for sure.
Did you see it on IMAX or something?
No, unfortunately. I just saw it on like a normal screen.
Okay.
Was there a 3D version of this one?
Yeah, I saw it in 3D.
Okay, I did not. I go to movies with a friend who's blind in one eye, so we tend to avoid the 3D ones because they don't work for him, which is fine because I've kind of gotten turned off on the 3D just in general.
Yeah, me too.
But I was curious if you felt that the 3D was justified.
In general, I'm not a fan of 3D. I only went to the 3D show because the time worked out better. And I can't say I particularly even noticed it while I was watching it.
Plus, it is Disney, so they push their own 3D technology. Mm-hmm. So,
well, that's a good sign if you saw it in 3D and you didn't particularly notice it. That means that the 3D worked.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah. I didn't actually see it in 3D either. I saw it twice in the theater, but I didn't see it in 3D either time. I saw it in RPX once, which is like sort of half-assed IMAX, but it's as close as I can get to a good theater here where I live.
RPX isn't so bad. I mean, the sound system's pretty decent. So.
Yeah.
But it did, I mean, going back to Callahan for a second, I mean, and that parallel universe, it did strike me as strange that it had never occurred to him to reconstruct the gate and try to rescue his daughter. Mm-hmm. Like, it seems like that would be the most obvious thing that he would want to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you would think that he would at least hold on to that hope that she was still alive and he would, sort of obsess over trying to, at least find out, or find some way to access that dimension to find out if she was still alive.
Well, if you want to rationalize that kind of thing away, I was sort of under the impression that they knew absolutely nothing about the interdimensional space, that they weren't even sure it existed. They were just building these gates and chucking things into it without understanding what they were doing. So I felt like it was a pretty natural assumption that she was dead. She got sent in there, the gate exploded, where was she going to go? It's like the transporter on Star Trek. When it goes wrong, it goes very, very wrong. So that didn't bother me because I felt like, yeah, that's for test pilots, for testing any kind of technology like that, that's a natural assumption. Where would she have gone? Because I felt like they didn't understand, which was part of Callahan's complaint, is that Craig didn't understand what he was doing.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Okay, I'll buy that. Thank you, Carrie.
No, you're welcome.
I was going to say, though, I thought that Rob was mentioning the scene where Callahan is sort of expressing his distrust of Cray at the science fair thing. I thought he should have seemed a lot more angry there. I guess it would have been a spoiler, but just like, you just it seemed very impersonal, and I didn't get the impression at all from that this is the guy who I hold responsible for murdering my daughter from that interaction.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that. Yeah, that's true.
That's the hand of the author on the plot there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is anyone worried that there's an evil red chip, skull-faced Baymax out there in the parallel universe somewhere?
Actually, that's probably what's going to happen in the sequel. I bet he's going to come back. Evil Baymax.
No,
evil,
we're not going to do that.
Evil healthcare assistant. That's all too easy to imagine.
Oh, I'm sure they're going to do a sequel, though. That seems pretty much a given.
Well, did you guys all catch the scene at the end of the movie, the post-credits scene?
Oh, yes, the Easter egg.
Yep. I still can't believe how many people just haven't clued in by now that it's a Marvel movie. You have to stay and watch the freaking extra scene. Everybody leaves.
I think a lot of people know, they just don't care.
Oh, how could you not care?
My mind.
Yeah.
Because there's this whole other story going on in the Easter eggs.
I think the Marvel fans, the people who love this, that they stay because they know. The people who know but don't care, they go. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, but maybe it's just because I live in an uncultured wasteland, but literally everyone in the theater left. It was us, and that was it. Everyone else in the theater left. It would have been both times, but we had people who were sitting sort of on the side of us, and they were sort of trapped in by us. And so they were going to leave, but then my wife convinced them to stay because she told them about the extra scene. But everybody else left. So,
but do you think that's going to be a part of the sequel, or was that just a one-off gag in this movie?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
That felt like a gag to me.
It's not like they can have Stan Lee come back as a main character in the next movie, can they?
Yeah, it could be. It could be It could be Big Hero 7, and then Stan Lee is the super dad who joins their team.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Yeah. I was trying to figure out if we were supposed to recognize that costume or anything. It kind of reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite tell what. But do you guys know? Was it just an original superhero costume that his dad happened to have be using or whatever?
I didn't recognize it.
Okay.
And my comics guru didn't recognize it.
Okay.
Didn't say that he did. So
yeah.
Who knows? There are so many references and so many superheroes and superhero costumes out there that every time, when I'm writing the Golden Age books, I try to be original and I try to come up with superhero names. And then you Google it and you find out, well, yes, there was a 5-issue series with this obscure character in 1977 that no one's ever done anything with, but it's all already been done.
Right.
So who knows? It could be something out of Stan Lee's idea file that he never got around to doing. That would be kind of fun.
I did really like that scene, though, where Fred turns out to be a Trustafarian and he has all the comic books and action figures and stuff.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So any final thoughts on Big Hero 6 before we move on to Interstellar?
I think if you have anybody who has kids should take their kids to see it. it's a good movie for, like you said, a lot of heart.
I think you should take yourself to see it even if you don't have kids. And if for some reason you feel like you need to have a kid with you, you borrow someone else's kid. But I mean, you should definitely go see this movie. I just honestly, I loved it so much, and I kept thinking about it afterward. And when the opportunity came up, like, because my sister-in-law didn't go with us when we went to see it the first time, so it's like when she wanted to go, it's like, oh well, yes, I will obviously go again to see it. I mean, I've just been thinking about it like so much since I've seen it. I mean, I even like the music from it, and I don't usually listen to pop music at all, but like I've been listening to the main title song over and over, largely I think because it just makes me think about the movie more. So I mean, I just loved it completely. So definitely go see it.
All right, cool. So let's do Interstellar now. So John, why don't you kick us off again and tell us, same thing. What were you expecting out of Interstellar? What did you heard about it beforehand? What were your expectations going in?
Right. Well, I'm a pretty big Christopher Nolan fan. I mean, Inception is one of my favorite movies of all time. I mean, it's probably my favorite science fiction movie, and I feel like I like replay it in my head, like when I'm bored. Sometimes it's just like it's like an unending loop, basically. So I mean, I had pretty high expectations just because I'm such a huge fan of Inception. And I mean, he's done lots of other great movies too, but I mean, like, Inception's like the big thing for me. And so I was very excited when I saw that he was making this movie, and when I saw the first trailer, I was pretty underwhelmed by it, because it's like there was a lot of corn. There was a lot of shots of corn, and it was like on Earth, and I was like, come on, the movie's called Interstellar, but I was like, I'm hoping that they're just saving all the cool, awesome shit from the movie, and they don't want to show it to us all in the trailer. Which, I mean, fair enough, there's tons of cool, awesome shit in the movie, but, I mean, I was pretty underwhelmed by the trailer, and then they released a couple other trailers, and I was like, okay, yeah, it's looking pretty good. I tried not to get too excited, I mean, I don't know. So I guess I had probably impossibly high expectations just based on Christopher Nolan, which may account for me maybe not loving it as much as I thought I would, but yeah, so that's where I came from.
Okay, how about Carrie? What were your expectations?
Well, I'm the exact opposite of John. I am not a fan of Christopher Nolan. I've liked some of his stuff, but I got really, really burned on the last two Batman movies. I was not actually a fan of Inception, but that's a conversation for a different time, I think. But I am such a sucker for spaceship movies and space exploration. Those are some of my favorite things to read about and watch movies about. But I knew I was going to get hurt. I knew not to raise my expectations because there's not a good track record for this kind of movie. They will show me lots of pretty pictures of cool planets and starscapes and spaceships and astronauts and all the cool stuff that I love so much. And then it will all fall apart in the movie. And it's happened over and over and over again. So I sort of went into the movie bracing and hoping. And there are things about the movie I really loved, but it did the thing that they keep doing to me where I want a movie about space exploration, but what they do is give me some melodrama about people behaving badly and yelling at each other, and then a monster. It's not literally a monster in this movie, but spoilers, everybody. But they do have the character who sort of jumps out of the closet, towards the end and makes everything more difficult for no apparent reason. Event Horizon did the same thing. Sunshine did the same thing. We've got this great spaceship movie about cool things happening, and then all of a sudden we throw a monster into it because it seems like to me that Hollywood doesn't trust the idea of space exploration to be interesting enough on its own. And for me, this was another movie that demonstrated that same thing, that for some reason they didn't trust us to just go along for the ride and for space exploration to be tense enough and interesting enough. And that was my worry when I went into the movie, and those worries turned out to be pretty justified.
Okay, how about, first, before we get too much into that, how about Rob, your expectations? I mean, you're a big Christopher Nolan fan, I think, right? What were you expecting out of this movie?
Yeah, I like Nolan a lot. I loved his movie Memento. I thought that was a very intimate movie. And a philosophical one, emotional. And I purposely avoided everything involved with Interstellar so that I wouldn't get caught up with the hype. I wouldn't get caught up with fragments, so that I would put too much of my emotions into a little bit of data, so to speak. So I really, really did not know anything about the movie. I just purposely kept myself ignorant. And the movie, for me, worked on a science fiction level, on an emotional level, on a philosophical level, and on an intimate level. And so, yeah, the movie worked for me. The movie worked for me. I had to see it twice for me to completely understand what I think he was trying to accomplish filmically and thematically. For me, the movie worked.
Okay, and then I'll say, I mean, I was really underwhelmed by the trailer. I think I said on the show that it just looked like it was about dads love their kids, and which I think is fine, but didn't particularly compel me to see the movie. I was sort of interested in seeing it just because it was Christopher Nolan, and I have liked his movies in the past. But what really made me want to watch it is I read an article in Wired about how they had done fairly sophisticated visualizations of some of the celestial objects in the movie. And really paid attention to the science, and actually some scientific data had come out of the visualizations they did for the movie, and that really intrigued me. So I was mostly interested in seeing the movie for that. And right before we went, I saw that it was something like it was 80%, 75% or something on Rotten Tomatoes. So I had fairly modest expectations going into it, and I sort of imagined it was going to be the kind of movie that was sort of okay and wouldn't really appeal to most people, but that I would kind of like it more just because I love science fiction stuff so much. Mm-hmm. So those were kind of my expectations going in. I don't know, Carrie, why don't you talk a little bit more about some of the issues you had with the movie? How about let's try to stick to sort of the first third half of the movie.
Okay. I love the visualizations. It's a beautiful movie. It's hard to. I'm trying to divide it up and remember the first third. So if we talk about before they actually launch, maybe.
Yeah.
That I felt like it was a little melodramatic. I felt like the emotional side of the story was forced. I didn't believe a lot of it. It was long. And for me, it's kind of encapsulated in. They kept reciting that Dylan Thomas poem, the very famous Dylan Thomas poem. And for me, that it felt like they were trying to shoehorn in emotion that they weren't actually getting from the story. You hear that poem and it's like, okay, this is how I'm supposed to be feeling. Because this very famous poem is telling me how I ought to be feeling in this scene. And the problem is that the poem itself is such a cliche at this point, and it wasn't really the appropriate, poem. It wasn't the appropriate tone or emotion for, I think, what they were trying to do. It's the rage against the dying of the light, by Dylan Thomas, and it's a poem about anger and futility of fighting against death. And whereas I felt this story was supposed to be kind of evoking hope, so that I kept running into these tonal things where are we explorers who are trying to save the world, or are we doomed to die? And those kept being in conflict, and on top of that. Characters just kind of behaving in very melodramatic ways that that were a little tiring for me. So that by the time we launched, it was like, oh, thank God we're in space now. We can leave all that behind. Except, of course, we can't leave it all behind because, we're constantly getting reminders. And it's the two stories. There's the story back on Earth and the story on the ship, which is it's wonderful on the one hand because it's this very classic time dilation story, which is such a great science fiction trope that has been that I'm not sure we've ever really seen done that effectively in a movie, and Interstellar really made a great attempt at telling that story, but the melodrama I think was just a little thick for me. And I will grant that I think my reaction may be really idiosyncratic. I know a lot of people didn't feel the way I did about it.
Well, I know a lot of people did too. I mean, it seems to be a very divisive movie in that respect. But I just want to say about the early stages of the movie, the one thing that really sold me on the movie was just the scene where Matthew McConaughey's kid's teacher is teaching that the moon landing was a hoax.
Oh, yeah.
And I just found that so eerie and just so, I don't know, it just resonated with me so much that that kind of made made the first act for me, regardless of what other issues I had with it.
Yeah, that is the scene that made me fall into the movie. I literally fell into the movie when that scene happened.
How I felt like I was being lectured at.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah,
know,
it seemed eerily familiar to me, and I got angry.
Mm-hmm.
See, I felt like my stupid neighbors in the theater were being lectured at, and I like that.
There's a thread of rhetoric in the push for space exploration that I find tends towards manifest destiny. You know, we need to go explore space because manifest destiny, because we should, because we're Americans, hoorah, yay, we should go out because that's the heroic thing to do. And I don't like that thread of rhetoric. You know, I think there's a lot of really good reasons to go out and explore space and to send, you know, people out into space, but manifest destiny is not one of them. And so I sort of felt like that scene was hitting me over the head with a hammer with that thread of rhetoric. And so personally, I grated at it. It seemed a little on the nose and a little obvious, and it wasn't, didn't come from where I'm coming from.
I hear you on that, and that aspect of the film completely it was ineffective for me as well. But there were so many other elements that I liked that I was willing to forgive that cliche.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I really liked about the first third or so of the movie is I love the setting of the future Earth with the sort of climate apocalypse scenario that everyone's in, and like I really dug that. But like, so one of the things that kind of bugged me for a lot of the movie, which I mean gets resolved admittedly, but like the whole like thing with his kid and with his daughter and the ghost thing, and you know, like, so we see all that stuff happen, and then for so much of the movie it's like it's not explained, and you're like, well, what the fuck is that about? And it's like, and it was kind of annoying me because it's like this metaphysical bullshit in my hard science fiction movie, you know. And then, you know, it kind of gets explained later, but it's like, it's, you know, it's basically magic using science.
Well, and I think they could have won us over, but I think they, you know, by kind of emphasizing that emotional story, you know, kind of over and over and over emphasizing that emotional story, it did make it seem more metaphysical, and they didn't win me over with it either.
Well, I think the thing that I kind of had the same reaction, John, but the thing I probably hated the most about the movie was Anne Hathaway's unbelievably moronic speech about how love is the one thing that we know that transcends time and space, or some bullshit like that.
Well, and Matt Damon did a similar speech, you know, love can't transcend evolution, or whatever that speech that he gave was kind of the same thing.
Yeah, so it's like when you have stuff like that in the movie, it undermines your confidence that the sort of stuff you might be on the fence about is going to not turn out to be moronic. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, that certainly didn't help me in terms of the way I ended up piecing together, you know, what was meaningful for me about the movie. That actually got in the way for me. I just feel like he didn't need that. In terms of being able to accomplish what he was setting out to accomplish. That just wasn't necessary. It was a huge distraction.
Exactly, yeah.
But also, yeah, I mean, it was a huge distraction. It wasn't necessary. He could have been able to accomplish everything that I feel like he did accomplish without that ridiculous speech.
Like, sort of like Carrie was saying, that she always goes into these science fiction movies with high expectations, and then they're just, like, crushed, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing that crushes my hopes and dreams in science fiction movies, is you go in, I mean, because it's very easy to find written science fiction that is just, you know, has a scientific worldview, but it's virtually impossible to find Hollywood science fiction that has a scientific worldview. And so I think that's why this grates on me so much, is because, I just want to go to a movie where everyone's where the scientists act like scientists and don't
Right.
Yeah,
don't
well,
say like stupid Hollywood screenwriter moron
I mean,
bullshit.
Anne Hathaway's character did say something that was incredibly refreshing. Also, at least to me, especially in a movie like this, which is when she was saying nature isn't evil. Yeah, it's frightening, can be overwhelming, but she doesn't think it's evil. And I was like, oh, that's refreshing to see in a movie. So I mean, I felt like she said, I felt like there are some very good things, stated in the movie as well.
Tidal Wave Planet is my new favorite thing.
Well, wait, we're getting ahead of ourselves there, but so I wanted to talk about a little bit more about the first third. So one of the other things that sort of bugged me was Matthew McConaughey's character, like he discovers the coordinates or whatever to the secret launch facility, right? And it's like, but we know from later in the movie that he sent himself a message, whatever, right? But it's like, so like, I didn't think they did a very good job of communicating like the distance, like where did he live and where was the secret base. But it's like it's just so conveniently that it happened to be within like a couple hours drive from where he lived. Like that seemed like really weirdly coincidental to me. But then also just the fact that they could have kept that base secret and like they're building rockets and shit. And it's like I understand that like given the world economy or the state of the world the way it is, like you have to keep it secret. Like you can't let people know about it because like people would be like, why are you spending money on space? Help us feed our children. Which admittedly is probably a fair argument, but, like, I just found it really hard to believe that they could have built this entire secret facility and, like, had these spaceships that, like, interstellar spaceships that they were going to launch, like, from some secret facility on Earth.
Well, the secret facility was NORAD.
Yeah.
It's the gate driving into NORAD, and I think they actually even had it on the gate, which is,
right,
Colorado
true,
Springs.
right.
It's, like, literally 100
That's
miles
true.
from my house.
Right.
So that... it was really funny. It was very coincidental, and I think it was Heinlein. It was Heinlein himself who had the idea of launching railgun type rockets off of the Rocky Mountains outside of Colorado Springs. So that's the kind of thing I'm willing to buy. If I want rockets in space, I have to buy the secret base under Cheyenne Mountain. Which having lived, in the shadow of Cheyenne Mountain for a good bit of my life, that's okay with me. That was actually like, oh, it's in my backyard. That's so cool. And it's just kind of classic science fiction. It was another case where the movie actually did dig into the roots. The Stargate SG-1 main base is in NORAD. We have a secret base right there. It's just not very secret.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, John, you might also be able to say that, we find out by the end of the movie that some super advanced civilization, possibly future humans, possibly whatever.
It's future humans.
Is engineering all of these circumstances in order to save humanity. So maybe they, if they went to the trouble of building a wormhole, maybe they also went to the trouble of somehow getting him to live in that place in the first place or something.
That's true. Actually, that reminded me, has anybody read the book Starplex by Robert J. Sawyer?
I have not.
No. Okay, yeah, that book actually reminded me a lot of Interstellar, or Interstellar reminded me a lot of that book because that's sort of it's got a similar setup where there's these wormholes that humanity discovers and they don't know where they came from, and spoiler alert, it turns out it's people from the future who had created it, and it's like in the book they use it as like sort of a conservation of mass or something. I think it's like they push stars through these wormholes from the future in order to get enough mass back into the universe so that entropy doesn't end the universe, whatever. I don't know how to explain it, but you know what I mean. That's what they're doing. So I just I thought that reminded me a lot of that. But also, I published a story in Lightspeed called "The Old Equations" by Jake Kerr, which is obviously riffing on the Cold Equations by Tom Godwin. Right. But in the Old Equations,
I remember that story.
Yeah, so the Old Equations actually, this reminded me of that a lot too, because so in the Old Equations we have a situation with time dilation and the physics are actually sort of alternate history physics, but so you have a pilot who's on a test. you have a test pilot on a spaceship, and he's going on this mission, and he thought he was going to be gone for like a short time, but then it turns out that, there's time dilation and they didn't realize it. And so, he's young on the ship and he's communicating with his wife back on Earth and she's getting older. And so it's like, I felt like it did a really good job of capturing that same type of emotional story that I think Christopher Nolan was shooting for in this movie. And he was able to get most of it. Like the movie worked pretty well emotionally for me, but in order to get that emotion, Nolan sort of ended up with this really convoluted plot in order to make it happen. Whereas I felt like in the old Equations, like it's a much more simple plot, and it did what I think Nolan wanted to do. And so like, so Interstellar didn't work for me as well in that regard.
Another thread that bugs me, and this is across all movies, it's not just Interstellar. Interstellar is just the latest iteration of it. Is, we've had a number of movies now that have posited, look, we're ruining the planet, we're destroying the environment, Earth is no longer habitable, so we have to leave. In all of these stories, we have to leave Earth, and it kind of blows me away, because if we have the technology to move human civilization off of Earth, then we have the technology to fix Earth. And it seems like an abandonment of responsibility in all of these. And it's a personal pet peeve, but it just bugs me that no one in any of these stories sits down to think about what do we have to do to maybe fix the Earth, instead of, building these massive rockets and traveling to different star systems. It seems like that's actually a more difficult technology than it would be to maybe, fix things here. And I think it says something about our culture that is what seems like the better solution to a lot of people, or to storytellers anyway.
All right, cool. Let's move on. I want to talk about some things I actually did like about the movie. And some of the things I did like about the movie, I really, really liked. So as Carrie was just mentioning, I mean, the section of this movie from essentially when they launch to the point where they get off the water planet and find the massive effects of the time dilation. That sequence was amazing to me, and it was worth the price of admission for me, totally. Just for that section of the movie.
Totally, it was awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm with you, Dave. Like the parts of the movie that I liked, I loved. Like, I would say, like, overall, like I was sort of like so on the movie. Like there was parts of it that I didn't really like, but there were parts of it that I totally loved, and so like I'm definitely glad I went to go see it. But yeah, I mean, everything on that water planet was like, oh god, so amazing. Like that fucking water mountain, And it's like that. I'll say about the trailer. That's one thing that I was actually pissed off that I saw in the trailer, because like the teaser didn't show anything like that. But then one of the trailers that came after that was more detailed, and it actually had that. It showed that scene. It showed the wall of water, and it had the line, "That's not a mountain. It's."
Oh no way! Oh, that's
yeah. That was in the trailer, and I was so mad that I saw it, and I wish I had done what Rob had done and avoided it all, because that would have been so much better if I just had no idea what was happening in that scene. But yeah, I mean, everything on that planet was amazing. Like, you're totally right. And like, once they actually figure out what happened, that, they didn't really calculate the whole time dilation thing, right? So like, the message that came off the planet was actually not valid, because, she basically died shortly after landing, even though it
was only like a few minutes old.
Yeah.
It was wild.
That was great. Wild. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I wish the movie had focused more on stuff like that, and like, maybe, just restructure the story so that we could have more of that stuff.
That's exactly what I'm, was talking about earlier on. That kind of movie. I'm trying to think of examples of that kind of movie that I love, and I came up with Contact, 2010. Apollo 13, which granted is historical and not science fiction, but it's a movie focused on actually being in space, the actual science, the actual what would this really be like, and just showing us, and that, it turns out, is exciting and interesting enough all on its own. Because you notice the part of the movie that we all love the best is the part where nobody is kind of whinging about whether or not their dad loves them, or, crying about something, or giving speeches about love. You don't need that to have really interesting stuff going on.
But still, the human side of the story is very important for this movie. I mean, you have the parallel themes of reconciliation, right? The reconciling the quantum data with the relativity, and the characters' deep-seated need and desire, an emotion rooted in love, obviously. He has that really strong, deep-seated desire to reconcile with his daughter. One does not happen without the other.
And I think you can have both. I just think that the movie was weighted too much in one direction. I think they could have cut back a little bit on part of the movie. Some of those scenes went on too long. I felt like the movie overall was kind of maybe too long. So it needed a better balance.
Yeah,
To me, it was perfectly balanced, but we'll agree to disagree. There, so I'm sorry, Dave. Go on.
I mean, sort of my emotion. Like I said, I was from the trailer. I was very skeptical of the father-daughter kind of stuff in the movie, and I thought it was hokey and manipulative. But it still made me cry throughout the whole movie. Uh-huh. So, at the same time, I recognize how it's manipulative and hokey. It still affected me. So,
yeah.
And at the end of the movie, I just was completely emotionally drained, and I just sat there staring at the screen, and
right.
It took a while to rouse myself. So I'm kind of in the middle, I guess, there.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I'd be interested in watching it again, because I did have that same sort of experience where, I felt like it really worked pretty well emotionally, because I did kind of feel devastated as well. But once I got through watching the movie, although I also agree with Carrie that I think it was probably a little bit too long, maybe a half an hour too long at least. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, Dave. So.
Yeah, I mean, the fascinating things about Nolan films in general, which I think Carrie, has alluded to, is the fact that Nolan tends to cinematically express emotions in a very overwrought manner, and it might feel mechanical, it doesn't feel organic, and so on and so forth. For me, I have never really had that trouble with the way Nolan sort of cinematically evokes the human side of the story. Carrie, I know I'm putting words in your mouth, so please, stop me when if you feel like I'm misrepresenting, what you're saying. But for me, this is Chris Nolan's version of La Jetée. That crazy French film from the 60s, that science fiction movie, that has influenced many science fiction films.
Which was the inspiration for 12 Monkeys.
Right, exactly. That movie was the inspiration for 12 Monkeys. In fact, 12 Monkeys is basically a remake.
Right, it's based on it, yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, and La Jetée, is about what's the role. It's a movie that's asking very serious questions. It's not being glib. It's not, okay, so Nolan is definitely has over-sentimentalized, if you will, certain aspects of the emotional, parts of the film. But there's some serious-minded stuff he's asking here. He's asking some serious questions. What's the role of the human experience in a higher dimensional reality? Why does he, when he falls into that black hole and ends up falling into that fifth dimensional construct, why does he suddenly, why is that time, has expanded before him? And why is it that it's his daughter's bedroom? He's not being glib there. I mean, he's saying the reason why you would even survive the fifth dimension. I mean, Jesus Christ, you saw how they barely survived the time paradox. Your emotion, or in this case, Cooper's emotion, his deep desire to sort of root himself, to reconcile with his daughter, is what roots him to that scene, to his daughter's bedroom in that crazy multi-dimensional, fifth dimensional construct that he fell into.
No, I understand that's exactly what was happening, and that was clear in the plot. And I think maybe that's the problem. Is it was clear, it was obvious, it was very, very obvious. But I think that you're not putting words in my mouth. I think that Nolan's films are emotionally manipulative, and in some cases, I think emotionally shallow. By being manipulative, and like I said, this is idiosyncratic. This is why we have lots of different kinds of movies. But I question, is he asking those, kind of deep philosophical questions, or is he kind of just throwing them out there to show how smart he is? which
No,
which
well,
granted
I mean,
is a fine line, you know.
Right. Well,
It's our reaction as viewers that are going to determine that, not you know, this is reader reaction stuff. This isn't, you know, there's no right or wrong
right. I
answer
mean,
there.
I think
that,
Rob. I think unfortunately, I think we need to. We're running short on time, so I think we need to move
oh,
on.
oh,
So I
okay.
think we'll leave the conflict over Christopher Nolan's handling of emotion to be.
I like The Prestige. That's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie. So.
Well, that's funny because that's the one movie of his that underwhelmed me. That is hilarious. I love it.
But yeah, I think you guys are gonna have to agree to disagree on this one.
Yeah.
I did also just want to ask you guys about some of the other science fiction aspects. So it's just something simple like the robots. I thought the robots were pretty cool. I'd never seen robots quite like that before. I don't know, John, what do you think of the robots in this movie?
Yeah, I thought they were really interesting, and I thought it was actually really funny to have, you know, just seen before this, you know, Big Hero 6, which is about a robot, and how different the robots are. You know, like Baymax couldn't be any more different than the robots in Interstellar. And yeah, like you say, I mean, I've never seen robots depicted like this. I actually wanted to email Daniel Wilson and say, hey, what did you think about those robots? Because those seem like crazy robots I've never seen before, and does that seem like it makes sense to you? But yeah, no, they turned out to be really cool. So like at first they were very weird and off-putting because it's like, oh, wait, it's like a weird like obelisk robot, you know, but then like, you know, they seem to be very functional. And so yeah, no, it seemed pretty cool. I mean, like I said, I don't really have any idea about, you know, if that's like really feasible, like as a good robot design, but it seemed to work pretty well in the movie.
Yeah, there was a sort of Swiss Army knife aspect to it.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was kind of cool. I kind of liked it. Did you feel like maybe the design of the robots were sort of influenced by 2001, kind of like the sort of monolith sort of shape?
Yeah.
You know, because that's how I sort of.
I heard Nolan say in an interview that he wanted them to be inspired kind of by camera equipment, that, you know, like the stuff you would have on set, like the dollies and camera, you know, steady cams and stuff all look very functional, and then he thought a robot should look the same way. It's like nobody cares about what this looks like. It's designed to do a particular job.
Yeah, I found them very fascinating, and the jury's still out on whether I like them or not. I was reminded more of HAL. That, you know, as soon as you start putting personalities into computers, I do go back to 2001, but I went back to HAL, the HAL 9000, and you know, there's always, you know, everything that's come after that has kind of been a red herring, like, oh, we have an AI with personality. Are they going to go crazy and kill everybody at some point? As far as the physical design, I kept trying to kind of you reverse extrapolate. Is that a concept? Back to what we're doing, to what's happening in robotics now, and I couldn't quite. The evolution of that wasn't clear to me, because now we look at things like what the military is doing with the big dog type robotics, where you've got multiple legs, and you know, it's not very advanced in terms of science fiction, but they're doing some freaky cool things out there with like multi-legged robotics and robots that can do things like, you know, climb walls and carry big loads and just crazy things like that. And so I sort of felt like that was trying to extrapolate from some of what we're doing now, but I was missing the steps. I want to see the steps in between there, and that's yeah.
Well, that's funny because I was reading a review of the movie. I read a review a few days ago, and one reviewer was like, the robots are kind of like iPads with legs.
Well, yeah.
I thought that was funny. So.
All right, cool. How about the outer space stuff, which I think is a huge selling point to this movie, both the wormhole and the black hole?
Okay, well, first of all, did anyone see it in IMAX?
No.
Yeah, because I haven't had a chance to see it in IMAX either, so I was just wondering. Because that must be incredible.
Yeah, that was one thing that I said when after seeing it, is like, oh man, I would have loved to see that on IMAX. I mean, I would have definitely done that regardless of what I knew about the movie. Just knowing it was a new Christopher Nolan movie and it was set in space, I would have definitely wanted to go see it in IMAX, but alas, not.
But I just want to talk a little bit about the background of the movie, because I guess this movie was initially developed sort of by Kip Thorne. He's a famous scientist who specializes in black holes. And he and a film producer got together and they kind of sketched out the idea for a movie involving black holes. And then Steven Spielberg was attached for a while, and Jonathan Nolan worked on the script. And then Steven Spielberg left the project, and then it looked like the movie was not going to happen because Hollywood isn't going to trust very many directors with the kind of budget you would need to do this story. But then sort of in the meantime, Christopher Nolan became a big enough director that he became one of those directors. And so he took on this project. But so I just think it's interesting that, the science of black holes, was the origin point for this story, however far it ended up traveling from there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because Linda Obst and Kip Thorne did write a treatment in 2005 for Interstellar. And yeah, that's true. Spielberg did option that film, but then the option expired a few years ago, and Nolan picked it up. That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as in general, the space elements in the movie were really, really well done, and I just loved experiencing all of it. I think that Interstellar is a little bit hurt by the fact that Gravity came out a couple of years ago and sort of stole some of its thunder. Because without Gravity, I feel like my mind would have been blown by all of the visuals in this movie and all of the treatment of how putting people into space would be like. I feel like without Gravity, I would have been my mind would have been completely blown. But I felt like Gravity did a bunch of stuff better than Interstellar. So that's sort of hurt by comparison as well. It's throughout the whole movie of Gravity, I was just really, really tense, and I felt like the tension of the characters in the movie and everything. And I didn't really get that as much from Interstellar, even in the scenes where they're going for that. So there's that.
Yeah, I feel bad that Nolan, or most people haven't really gotten a chance to see the movie the way Nolan really intended it to be seen, because he shot over half the movie in IMAX. Shot it in IMAX. So, I just, for instance, when you saw The Dark Knight, on the regular film, and then when you saw The Dark Knight, on IMAX, they were almost two different stories in terms of the amount of information that you received. And so, I don't know, I feel like Interstellar is not really getting a fair shake in the sense that the film is not being seen in the way, he intended it to be seen.
I guess I have to correct myself, Rob. I saw this in fake IMAX, so
yeah, that's painful.
Yeah,
that's painful. That's painful to the wall.
Yeah, I don't. It didn't detract for me because the stories are so completely different. Gravity being such a kind of personal, intense, focused, basically a disaster movie, a disaster survival movie, versus Interstellar, which really is kind of literally cosmic and epic in scope. I just love living in a world where we have special effects in movies, that we can have two giant space movies in the space of a couple of years, enough to where we can start to feel blasé about it. I think that's just fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're very lucky.
For what it's worth, I felt like Interstellar was the only movie that I've seen really swing for the fences like it does. There's been movies that have done daring shit, but no one's even tried to make a movie like this in forever.
Because maybe 2001.
Yeah, probably, right?
So many references between the two movies.
Yeah.
I think Nolan knew where his roots came from. I'll give him that.
Right. Yeah. Even though I was citing Gravity, it's that is a completely different type of movie, and it's like Carrie says, it's more of a disaster movie. Just happens to be set in space, and it's really kind of even barely science fiction, if it even is at all. Versus Interstellar, which is going way outside, taking us out to discovering other planets and everything, but starting from this realistic near future space, which it's just basically never been really done in film.
Yeah, no, the film is fascinating in its scope, because it's part Grapes of Wrath, parts Contact, part 2001, and in terms of its thematic makeup, it's all La Jetée. So it's fascinating.
I want to say about the science, too. It's interesting because Kip Thorne wrote a book called The Science of Interstellar, which unfortunately I didn't get a chance to read, but there's been a lot of criticism of the science in this movie, and Kip Thorne says if you read his book, he addresses virtually all of those complaints. So I think, if you're interested, you should definitely check that out. I think one thing that the story did very wisely is have a lot of the more dubious stuff be the work of a super advanced civilization. So who even knows what they're capable of, right? Rather than they just find a wormhole, it was constructed for them. Rather than just finding some fifth dimensional tesseract, it was constructed for them. So, it's not just coincidence that humans can survive in these environments. They were constructed with unimaginable advanced technologies specifically for that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the first time I saw the film, I just sort of assumed that's why the black hole was so close to the wormholes, because the super civilization had harnessed the energy from the black hole in order to make a wormhole that size. I mean, wormholes do exist subatomically, right? I mean, they blip in and out of existence on the subatomic level, right? So in order to grab a wormhole and then to expand it to such a mammoth size would harness an incredible amount of energy. So I was just sort of, maybe I was giving Nolan much more credit than he deserved, because I just sort of assumed that that's why the black hole was so close, is because the super civilization had harnessed, the energy. In other words, they were using the black hole's power to.
No, I think that it's that Kip Thorne figured out probably lots of these things. As I said, I didn't read his book, so unfortunately I can't comment on that specifically. But I think any of the scientific credit has to go to him, not Christopher Nolan, because you just read about their interactions, and Christopher Nolan wanted there to be faster than light travel and all sorts of other scientifically impossible things, and he had to be talked back from the brink on these things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually don't have very many criticisms of the science. My science problems were nitpicky, like them not needing a booster rocket to get off of Water Planet and that kind of thing, which are nitpicky. So I love that kind of story enough that if they can give me a decent explanation, like the black hole powering the wormhole, I am totally okay with that. I don't have a problem. I want to be won over,
Yeah.
I want to fall into the story.
All right, cool. So let's talk about Act 3. We're gonna have to do this a little bit quickly, but
Space Madness, Matt Damon.
Yeah, and also the protracted epilogue kind of stuff. But I don't know, Carrie, why don't you just quickly run through some of the problems you had with Act 3?
My biggest was Space Madness, Matt Damon, as I have taken to calling him. I think the character's name was Man. Which started out great. It was this amazing scene where they go to one of the other planets where one of their initial explorers landed, and they wake him up from cryosleep, and it's this very kind of poignant. He talks about going to sleep not knowing if he was ever going to wake up, and how long has it been, and oh my God, the first time you've seen people, not knowing if you were ever going to see people again, and I love that scene. And then he kind of went a little bit crazy for no particular reason, and we got this kind of very long chase sequence with fighting. That tonally was off. It didn't really fit. And so, yeah, I kind of didn't know what to make of it. And that was when I started feeling like the movie had gotten really long and we needed to go do something else now. But yeah, the wormhole falling into the black hole, I was with him on all that. My only complaint is I wish it had been a little shorter and punchier. Yeah, the story at that point. I even like the epilogue. I love the space station. I love that whole idea. I love that he finally got back together with his daughter, who was very old at that point. That all felt very science fictional to me. It's just, once again, some of the character stuff felt off. I'll hand it over to John or Rob now.
Go ahead, Rob.
Oh, okay. I thought the reason why Dr. Mann went all haywire was because he needed... Dr. Mann did not go haywire until Cooper decided to go home. That's what triggered that. And Dr. Mann was insistent. I think he had his own sort of agenda in terms of finishing the mission. And obviously his planet was a bust, so he needed Cooper's ship in order to finish the mission. And he never really explained, or it wasn't clear to me anyway, how Dr. Mann was planning on accomplishing the mission. But to me, that's what triggered his so-called madness.
Okay, so Rob, but my interpretation of that was that he had volunteered for this potential suicide mission very, very
Correct.
courageously, but then
Correct.
in the course of being tested had discovered that he was actually a coward at heart and couldn't bring himself to die. And so everything he was doing subsequently was an attempt to preserve his own life, no matter the cost. And I actually kind of liked that in principle, and I thought like thematically his character worked, as a contrast to some of the other characters in the movie.
I certainly didn't have a problem.
I agree with Carrie though. Just the way it played on screen, it didn't work for me.
Oh, I see the way it's depicted.
Yeah.
I see. Well, yeah. I mean, again, the way Nolan does things either works for you or it doesn't. That's why he's so divisive, right? So, it worked for me though. It worked for
John,
me.
what did John? You got to be our tiebreaker
You
here.
have to yeah.
Yeah, well, I agree with the way you laid it out, Dave. Basically,
Rob is alone.
Yeah. So I'm
like Dr. Man.
Yeah, honestly, as far as the problems with the ending goes, I had much more of a problem with the sort of fifth dimensional stuff where he's like in behind the bookcase and all that. It's like it's cool, like it looks cool and everything, and it's like, and if Carrie, you're saying that the science seems okay, like I don't know, it's just like I felt like it wasn't sold well enough to me for me to be just like, oh sure, yeah, I buy that. Because it's like it just felt like Hollywood bullshit to me, honestly. Even though you're saying Kip Thorne has a book that explains all the science and everything, it's like, if so, great. I didn't feel like I had enough of a explanation from the movie for me to really buy it. And so while that stuff sort of worked pretty well emotionally, and I was glad that it explained away the metaphysical bullshit from earlier in the movie with the ghost and everything, yeah, I don't know. It just didn't really work for me 100%. Although, conceptually, the ideas that it's playing with are pretty cool.
Conceptually and thematically, it all makes sense if you just see the film La Jetée. I'm serious. I'm serious because that's what informs that movie. Informs that scene.
Okay.
Because it's literally about the role of human emotion or the role of the human experience, really, in a higher dimension, where time is laid out before you, where, as Neil deGrasse Tyson said when he was talking about Interstellar, time is laid out before you where it's all happening at once. When was I born? Well, I'm always being born. When am I going to die? Well, you're always dying. And so that sort of situation is actually overwhelming. You would fry. You would totally fry. And so what saves Cooper from getting fried is the fact that he has this very powerful memory of his daughter rejecting him. And that's what ties him. That's what anchors him in that time dimension. So I think that's where I think La Jetée really sort of informs the movie, at least, thematically.
All right, cool. So I just want to say quickly about the epilogue stuff. Like Carrie, I really liked the visual of the space colony thing. That I as an old-time science fiction fan, it really thrilled me to see stuff like that on screen. And I was also very moved emotionally when Cooper is reunited with his daughter, who's now on her deathbed. But I thought the scenes played pretty strangely, where he's gone to all this trouble to get back to her, and then they have a fairly brief conversation, and then he leaves again. And I wish that had been handled a little bit differently.
Now, see, I was fine with that. And what else is he going to do? Sit there and take up knitting, So he has to go back and rescue Anne Hathaway's character, of course. And I thought that was a fine place to end it. I just I think either Dave or John mentioned earlier, I would have trimmed the whole movie by half an hour, and I would have trimmed out some of the scenes of just people being overwrought, and. I'm thinking now a lot more than I did when I saw the movie of Contact, as an example of a movie that had a very strong emotional core, but balanced it, I think, quite a bit better. That's another movie that had a relationship between a father and a daughter and grief.
Right.
And it also had Matthew McConaughey in it. And such a big part of Ellie's character is, dealing with her grief and what trajectory that grief put her on. And then coming to terms with that so that she can start to have human relationships with other people, which is something she had never been able to do. That's the emotional heart of that movie. And yet, it seems so much more balanced to me than Interstellar.
Okay, John, we need to wrap this up. Any final thoughts on the ending of Interstellar?
Yeah, I mean, not really about the ending. I'll just say overall, like, yeah, like Carrie was saying. I mean, if I could have trimmed 30 minutes out of that, that would have been great. Like, and it's like, I sort of dream about being an editor in Hollywood. You know, I'm an editor in publishing. If I sort of dream about being an editor in Hollywood who somehow has Final Cut, and just like trimming the shit out of, you know, trimming the actual shit in movies out of them, and you know, making them better. Like, it's just so many movies I could improve if only someone would give me the chance. But you know, yeah, alas, we have to deal with them as they come. But yeah, I mean, yeah, overall, I'm still sort of undecided about what I felt about the movie. You know, I mean, like I said, I loved lots of parts of it, but overall, yeah, it just didn't really quite come together for me. So I couldn't have to see it again to really firm up, you know, whether I think it's actually a decent movie or not. I'm sort of leaning towards no, though.
Okay, well, you know, the time has come. Big Hero 6 versus Interstellar. So John, you're gonna have to like make up your mind fast.
Oh, I got it. Big Hero 6 all the way. No question whatsoever.
Okay. Do you have any commentary on that you want to provide?
Oh, I mean, I loved Big Hero 6 like unreservedly, and you know, given I have so many questions about how I feel about Interstellar, to me it's a no-brainer. You know, it makes me sad to say that as a science fiction fan. I mean, I love hard SF, and Interstellar was actually, you know, trying to do something big and cosmic and like nothing we've ever seen before. Whereas Big Hero 6, admittedly, is you know, not doing anything too original. But I just actually, Big Hero 6 was so good that I came out of the theater actually kind of depressed about it, because I was like, I will never do anything in my career that will affect anybody remotely like that.
What about this podcast, John?
Well, of course, Geek's Guide aside. But yeah, no, I mean, I just because it's like anything I do, like, I mean, anything anybody does with a book basically is never going to do that, just because of the experience of watching a movie and, you know, seeing it together with people, and the fact that everyone will have seen it, as opposed to, you know, you read a book, even a very popular book, the chances are most of your friends haven't read it, right? So yeah, it kind of hit me on that existential level, you know. But yeah, I mean, it was so good. I couldn't stop thinking about it. So for me, it's no brainer.
All right, so that's one vote for Big Hero 6. Rob, where do you come down on this one?
Do I have to vote? I mean, I love both movies so much for completely different reasons. I mean, it really is an apples and oranges comparison for me. But loved Big Hero 6. I think Interstellar is more important. I think you know, there was a genuine effort by the director to reach higher. You know, he was reaching higher for, you know, whether he failed or not is completely up to, you know, us. But I feel like he was reaching for more, and I think it's a more important film. So I'm going to pick Interstellar.
Okay, so we've got a tie, one for Big Hero 6 and one for Interstellar. So Carrie, what do you think?
I'm not going to help you out here much. You know, to start with, I appreciate both movies because I really appreciate having big budget movies where scientists are the main characters. Scientists doing science. So I appreciate them both for that. There were things I liked about both, and there were things I didn't like about both. And I would rewatch them both, but for different moods, you know, and for different reasons. I know you don't want me to do a tie, but I kind of have to do a tie because, yeah, like everyone has said, is I like them both for different reasons, but I have nitpicks on both of them. Neither one is ever going to be a favorite movie of mine. So they're, you know, they're the kind of movies that if I see them on TV, I will probably leave them on while I'm doing something else.
All right, so that means I get to be the tie.
You have to be the tiebreaker.
So I get to be the tiebreaker. Oh, I love the sense of power. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to give the edge to Interstellar on this one.
John is alone.
There was a lot more stuff I disliked in Interstellar, but there was more stuff I liked as well. And in the end, you know, I'm just gonna have to go with how I felt at the end of the two movies. And at the end of Interstellar, I just felt like like I said, I had this experience. And at the end of Big Hero 6, I thought like, it was fun, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there's, the Big Hero 6 is a much more consistent movie, and Interstellar is a much more flawed, more ambitious movie. And in the end, I'm going to have to go with the flawed, ambitious movie on this one. So I guess Interstellar is the winner of our first movie face-off episode here.
I object.
But John, I thought gave a strong dissenting opinion there. So
we'll take it up in appeal.
So I hope the Big Hero 6 fans, feel like they were well represented as well. All right, cool. But so we need to start wrapping this up. So yes, we've been speaking with John Joseph Adams and Rob Bland and Carrie Vaughn. So guys, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's fun as always.
And that was our panel. So big thanks again to John Joseph Adams, Rob Bland, and Carrie Vaughn for joining us as guests. And a very special thank you to listener Justin Tabor, crowdfunder number 94, who just made a very generous $50 contribution to the show. This episode was also made possible thanks to support from listeners such as Joanna Evans, George Turcotte, Vlad Levin, Zoe Akim, Jeff Gass, Kenneth Reed, Raymond Chan, Stephen Tegarian, Bruno Onkier, Kurt Donaldson, and Jonathan Pottle. So thanks guys, we really appreciate it. To learn more, visit us at geeksguideshow.com and click on crowdfunding. And if you live in the New York area, you should come out and meet Stephen Gould, our guest from episode 116. He'll be appearing at the KGB Barr on December 17th alongside Rajan Khanna, who's appeared on 4 of our shows, most recently in episode 109. To learn more, follow Geeks Guide NYC on Twitter. Alright, so that was our show. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.
The Geek's Guide to the Galaxy is a production of Wired.com. For more information about the show, visit geeksguideshow.com. To learn more about your host, visit davidbarrkirtley.com. Music and voiceover produced by yours truly, Jack Kincaid. If you enjoyed this program, tell your friends. If you didn't enjoy it, tell no one. Thank you for listening.